Hi, everyone. I have the time now, so I'm going to get going. Welcome to the Mentoring Program Seminar hosted by the International Society Hypertension Mentoring Training Committee. My name is McCarthy from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine in the United States. And joining me in leading today's session is Dr. Lebo from Northwest University, South Africa. Today, we have an exciting lineup of ISH leaders, including Drs. Francine Marques, Alta, Schutte, Dillon Berger, and Augusto Montezano. The objectives for today's session are to discuss why mentoring is important and how to build successful relationships with mentors. Just a couple of reminders for today's session. Please keep cameras and microphones off unless you're speaking. In the interest of time, please hold questions and discussion until the end of the respective speaker's presentation. Questions can either be asked by raising your hand and unmuting or typing into the chat box. And please be aware that today's session is being recorded. Without further ado, I will pass over to Dr. Lebo, who will introduce our first speaker.
Hello, everyone. Our first talk is on mentors, and the title is What Are They and How Do You Find One? This talk will be presented by Associate Professor Francine Marques, who is a National Heart Foundation Future Leader Fellow and the head of the Hypertension Research Laboratory at Monash University, Australia. She is also the chair of the Mentoring and Training Committee at the International Society of Hypertension. Dr. Marques, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Let me just share my screen. And I'd like to thank the International Society of Hypertension for allowing us to deliver this short symposium today. And I also thank everybody that has agreed to talk today and everybody that is attending. So before I tell you about mentors, I want to tell you about the history behind the word mentor. And this started in the Odyssey, one of the major ancient Greek epic poems attributed to Homer. So in this poem, the Greek king Odysseus went to the Trojan War, and he left his wife Penelope and also his infant son Telemachus. So he left a friend that was supposed to counsel Telemachus, and this friend was called Mentor. But Mentor wasn't particularly a good mentor. And what happened instead was that the goddess Athena decided to intervene. So she disguised herself as Mentor and gave him proper mentoring or proper advice. So she inspired him to have menace, which was translated at the time as a heroic strength, or perhaps these days as a mental strength or courage. So the moral of this story is that the first ever mentor was a woman, a goddess, of course, but also that since ancient times, mentors have been inspiring mentees to have courage. And mentors can have many different roles. And we have an enormous body of evidence these days that having a good, appropriate mentoring is also key to long-term success. So let me tell you exactly what mentors these days can help us with. So mentors can help us, for example, with advice and clarify different questions that we have. They can also help to sponsor us and guide us in the path to success. Mentors can also act as advisors and help us to set up goals and also directions for our future career. And they can also help us develop essential skills that can also guide us with future careers and job applications and so on. Mentors can also help us to network and provide support, acting as a broker And they can also give us motivation acting as an affirmer. And finally, they can also challenge our thoughts, helping us along the way in terms of coaching. So mentors are basically people that can facilitate transmission of knowledge and communication through many of these different areas, and they don't need to have just one specific role. But they can also facilitate introductions and, very importantly, provide unbiased advice for our career development. So they are not someone that will have an interest in the end of the day of the outcome of our decisions. And I want to give you a few examples of what my mentors have helped me with. So just to give some, put this into some more case study, I'll give you some very specific examples. So Professor Fadi Chacha, for example, has acted as a sponsor and as a broker, and has helped me to network and introduce me to the society many years ago when I had just finished my PhD. Professor Stephen Harrop has acted as an affirmer and has inspired me to keep going on many instances where I didn't know where I was going or whether that was leading anywhere. And I'm sorry, I have a hungry puppy sitting next to me that I'm sorry if there's any barking. Professor Gavin Lambert has also acted as a challenger and has given me essential feedback on fellowship and grant applications. And Professor Jeff Head has acted as a sponsor. He has given me the most generous referee letters, and he has also acted as a clarifier, helping me to set up new skills such as clinical trials. But something that you might notice in common here, sorry, is that all the mentors at this stage, all my mentors at this stage, they're amazing, but they were all male. So at this point in my career, I realized that I needed specifically a female mentor, and I specifically asked Professor Julie McMullen to be my female mentor. And Julie has been amazing and has acted as an advisor, giving me essential feedback in terms of career path when she was the only person that when I expressed some doubts, she would ask me what my plan B was. But what I learned through my own career development as a mentee and now also as a mentor is that we all need mentors outside our supervisory teams. We also can be mentees, but we can act as mentors to other people along the way because every single experience that we gain is valuable. And while having one mentor is good, the reality is that having a mentoring team is even better. And I'm happy to talk more about this during the questions. And mentorship also comes in many different forms. They can be even a fellow PhD student. They can be a postdoctoral researcher, or the most common form that we usually hear about is a senior research in our field or outside our field. They can also be in the same institution where we're based, or they can be based in a completely different place, not just in our city or in our country, but they could be in a completely different place in the world. And they can also come in different types of gender, ethnicity, race, and everything else. So basically, there is no any prescription on what a mentor should really look like or be. In the end of the day, it is all about supporting us. And the question is how we find these amazing mentors. So as part of the International Society, we provide matching making. And I'll tell you briefly how to do that. You can also find mentors in your own institution, and some will be running their own mentoring programs. Otherwise, you can always approach people. You can also find through your peers, through your local societies and networks, and even through social media. And I have had a few people that, for example, approached me because of shared values that they perceive using social media. Through the International Society, we have Dr. Gafane-Matemane and Dr. McCarthy that are responsible for the mentoring program itself. And it is a very simple process that you fill in a Google form that takes about 5 minutes. You tell us exactly what skills and what you're looking for in a mentor. And we then do the matching based on that information to identify specifically what do you want to gain from the relationship, which is the key aspect in the end of the day. And I just wanted to briefly mention that I think one of the key aspects of developing a mentoring relationship is developing trust, as defined by Charles Pittman as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. And this takes time. And acknowledge that because of that, sometimes people may perceive that relationships are not going well. So it's important that as falling in love takes time, developing trust in any mentoring relationship is also taking a little bit of time. So we need to consider that the people that we let in our circle of trust will be at long term, and this will be based on setting up appropriate boundaries on both sides. Also accountability, integrity, reliability, non-judgment, and generosity. And these for any trust development, but I can't think of better words also for when we're setting up mentoring relationship. And I want to acknowledge that not every single match is going to work. And there may be times that, just like when we fall in love in the real world, that we might have to break up with our mentor as well. And it's important to know that that's okay. And you can always, if you're part of the mentoring program at the ISH, you can always come and have a chat to us. And we can always then look into what went wrong and how we can support you to make sure that either we can improve that relationship or a new match. And in my experience, the most common reasons are usually because of there is an power imbalance, or there are unrealistic expectations from one or both sides. So examples might be that the mentor doesn't take the time to email back or make time to meet, but also that the mentee doesn't feel comfortable in sharing, or there is a lack of commitment or overall. So I hope this is something that we can discuss today, but I just wanted to acknowledge this. If you're keen to learn more about mentoring, we have built an enormous resource now through the podcast. So there are over 20 interviews now available. These are just some of the first ones that we did. And these were incredibly helpful to learn more about mentoring. I just wanted to finish this by saying this quote from Simon Sinek, that failure we can do alone, but success always takes help. So please engage with mentors if you're not already, and I look forward to discussing further. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran, for that concise definition of mentors and mentees and their roles. I was wondering, as we wait for questions to come in, can you discuss a little bit about specific strategies that you've seen that are successful, that mentees have used to foster relationships with mentors?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it is taking time to build that relationship. And I think that perhaps is a challenge these days when we're trying to establish relationships online first. But I think just taking the time and having consistency. So for example, with setting up a meeting now, but continue to catch up in the future. So setting up, for example, a meeting every 3 months, so that there is that continuity and you're not just waiting to approach a mentor when there is a problem, because that's probably too late. So you need to have built that relationship prior to having an issue, so you have that support when you need.
Great, thank you. So Dillon, Dr. Berger has written in the chat. Francine, I'm curious, what challenges that you were facing led you to feel the need to seek out a female mentor?
I didn't have the specific challenges that I didn't think that my male mentors could help me with. They are all amazing, and I would say I've been quite aware of gender disparities, but I just felt that there were certain things that we all know these days, that there is an enormous amount of unconscious bias, and that women suffer. And I think just having someone that could relate to that was important to me, and seeing what issues specifically as a senior female researcher that she had faced that I was probably going to face ahead of me. I think that was one of the main reasons.
The next question is from Dr. Montezano. Hi, Francine. Do you think there is a career stage for mentorship to start? And if not, in the case of PhD students / candidates, do you think mentors are different from supervisors?
Career stage as early as you can, because you're always going to benefit from mentoring. It doesn't depend on what career stage. I started with my first external mentor from my PhD, after my PhD. But if I had known how powerful it is, I would probably have sought a mentor much earlier on. And I push all my PhD students to have external mentors, and I think that has been quite beneficial to them. I see them now developing these independent relationships, being suggested to attend conferences different to what I would usually go to, and apply for awards and so on. That was all their mentors doing. That wasn't necessarily me. So I would say that it is beneficial even at the PhD stage to definitely have mentors different from your supervisors.
Another question.
Oh.
Sorry. At what stage of the academic career do we not need mentors anymore?
Great question, Alta. I'm still quite junior in my career, so I probably will struggle to answer that. I would say that I probably will need mentors for the rest of my life, and I think there were a few people that we interviewed, past presidents of the ISH, that they said that even when they got to that stage of the presidency, that they still had past presidents that mentored them as well. So, but perhaps that's something you can comment.
Yes, if I actually agree with you. I think mentors are always needed. That doesn't matter what stage of your career you are. So don't feel that when you are in an early phase, it's only you. Everybody needs a mentor, even when you're in a senior phase.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So Rodrigo has a question. Thank you, Francine. Great talk. I'm wondering what characteristics have mentors that led us to recognize them?
Okay. I'm not sure if I understand the question, Rodrigo. Do you mean that perhaps you have a mentor, but you're not sure whether they are a mentor? In that case, I'll probably say that if you have someone who is acting and has any of those mentoring traits that I discussed before, that probably they are a mentor. Perhaps you just haven't named the relationship, because that would have been the case for many of my mentors as well. But I would say that there are people that make themselves available and people that are willing to actively listen to you and not just talk about how they would handle situations without taking your experience into consideration.
Dr. Rios, Francisco Rios asked, Francine, great talk, thank you. Do you think that sometimes the supervisor might get jealous about the student finding another mentor? How to deal with these issues? These might be more common during the PhD stage.
Yeah, I would just make sure that it is discussed with the supervisor that they are comfortable with the mentee having an external or the student having an external mentor. But I think that it would be beneficial for the student to start developing those networking skills, improve their communication skills, and having someone that they can talk to that is external to their PhD. And I'll tell you, like, if you don't think that that's a good idea, your student is probably going to do that anyway, but they're just going to talk to people that you don't know, and you're not going to hear about it. I think it is important that if we have that mentoring role established, that they know that they have that person that can support them if there are any issues. And there might be people that act on a similar role, such as chairs of PhD panels. At least we have here internally at Monash University. in a similar situation. But I think it is just another layer of support for PhD students, and I think it is overall beneficial. But this is something that needs to be discussed with supervisors.
So last question, in the interest of maintaining our schedule, Rebecca asked, is it possible to have mentors from another country? Would it be just for PhD students?
Absolutely, and I think that that's really important, and that's definitely an option these days with Zoom and other technologies, that we can establish relationships with people in other countries. This is specifically what we try to do with the issues, as link people in different countries or continents and all over the place, is to be able to give you that networking possibility, especially when we can't travel. So, and not just for PhD students, for ACRs, or basically for any career stage, if you feel the need for a mentor, we can definitely facilitate that.
Thanks, Fran. So Gutu left one more question in the chat. Maybe you can get to it if you have a moment during the session, so everyone can see your response. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So the next portion of our seminar will be about building successful relationships with mentors. This session will be separated into talks from Drs. Alta, Schutte, Dillon Berger, and followed up by a panel discussion. So to introduce our speakers, Dr. Schutte is a professor and principal theme lead of cardiac, vascular, and metabolic medicine in the Faculty of Medicine and Health at the University of New South Wales, Australia, with a joint appointment as a professional fellow at the George Institute for Global Health. She is part of the executive committee as the immediate past president of ISH, and is a member of the Women in Hypertension Committee and the Africa Regional Advisory Group. Thank you, Dr. Schutte. Please lead us away.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Cam, and also to everybody who has been arranging this meeting. It's really lovely to be part of this. I'm personally passionate about mentorship, whether it's in a formal or informal format. And so I don't have a lot of slides. I just placed a few key points here to sort of guide the conversation. It would be great to be informal and have some discussions also afterwards. So please feel free with popping in your questions in the chat box and afterwards. So first of all, in terms of building relationships, it's a bit different from maintaining these relationships once you have them, and also over time to evaluate, is this a good one? Should I get out of it? Should I rather build other mentor-mentee relationships? So it's about how to build it in my understanding in terms of this topic. And of course, there are very different aspects here that's at play, but I think the take-home message for me, which I will give you at the very start, is about taking that very first step. I think it has a lot to do with that courage and confidence that you need to put yourself out there, because it's often not somebody that you already know, but it can be so different. I think Francine really summarized it beautifully. Your mentor can be diverse. It can be 4 or 5. They can be at the same time, and you will need them likely throughout your whole career. So the earlier you start to develop these sort of relationships, the easier I think it will get. But again, that very first step in putting yourself out there is often the challenge, and it may be best to start locally. In other words, at your own university. Of course, if you're a PhD student or a postdoc, your supervisor is the likely person to start off with, but then expanding it and to try and find another person first and then another one, and to make them as diverse as possible. You don't want them all to look and think the same way. I think that diversity is extremely important. So if it's somebody from another country, great. If it's somebody from another discipline, sometimes even better. So it's really important to have open discussions with these individuals who you completely trust. But it takes time to develop it, and often indeed it doesn't work out as you hoped it would. I would like to discuss also the different formats of face-to-face contact and virtual contact. And in effect, I thought originally, maybe the one would be easier than the other, but I don't necessarily think so. It does depend a lot on your own personality. But taking that first step via, whether it's through an email before a scientific meeting, for example, or just sending an email to somebody that you think would probably be a good fit for you, it's reaching out. And sending that email is a virtual format, and perhaps a safe way, because you don't have to speak at that stage if it's somebody that you haven't actually met before. But if it's somebody that you've perhaps bumped into in a meeting and a conference, then it may be slightly easier to actually follow up with an email. Virtual meetings, like Francine also mentioned, through Zoom or Teams or whatever format you prefer, we're also used to it by now. It's not that awkward as it's been a few years ago to actually sit and look at a screen with somebody on a different continent. It's not that difficult anymore, and even for the mentors, it's not something that's strange to do. I've been doing it also recently with the ISH mentorship scheme, developing that sort of relationships, and it does work. It does work well. It's almost it's very comfortable as well, because you're sitting in your own home and having that conversation, and hopefully trying to help and guide the mentee. So it's about taking that first step in building the relationship, and to first, I mentioned sending an email perhaps, or if you're at a scientific meeting. I mean, we don't have that face-to-face at the moment, but one day I believe we will get back to that format again, maybe in hybrid or whatever format, doesn't really matter that much. But making contact is to make sure that you know that individual. You have to know something about it, to find something to link up with, for example, knowing the research work that they are doing, and to tie that into it, whether they perhaps just gave a presentation, try and link up to it, contacting them. So doing a bit of spying or doing your own research before meeting that person may help you just to know what to say when you actually get in touch. I think it's important to realize from a mentee perspective that overall mentors are friendly and understanding, and they know how difficult it is to make that first move. But I think, and I therefore want to encourage you to be courageous and to do take that first step. Some of this will also come from this next slide on, from a mentor's perspective, what makes it easier for a mentor to actually help guide a mentee, and to the traits from the very first step to throughout that relationship. Some of it may have been mentioned, but I think it's very important to be friendly and to be open. And I'm referring to the mentee now, but of course you want the mentor to be the same. And that refers to the fact that if you have one supervisor and another mentor at another unit or another university or wherever, I think it's important to be open and to let your supervisor know, or even ask their advice, especially if you have a good supervisor relationship. I realize it's not always the case, but to actually discuss it with your supervisor, and hopefully your supervisor will have the insight and understanding to support you in that process, and realizing the amazing benefits that may come from such relationships. And to be honest, it's almost the same as in the very first bullet, and to be humble. I think it's about that confidence without arrogance. It's really nice to be approached by a mentee, but sometimes you do find that there's some arrogance out there. It's not always encouraging them to establish that relationship. I don't want them to be crawling on the floor, but I do think just having an open relationship, it's really not a top-down relationship. It's very, very equal, and it's very encouraging and trustworthy relationship, but it's great if it's open and honest. A good mentee respects the fact that mentors often have extremely busy schedules, They are willing to help you, but you have to respect the fact that they can't necessarily have a meeting when you need one. And therefore good to plan ahead, have some structure. If it's a monthly meeting, for example, to have it in the diary longer time beforehand to make sure that it is part of the planning of the schedule. And then that aspect I mentioned before, I might take home message, willing to take the first step. As I said, it shows courage. Mentors have all been there. We have all also had to take that first step. We know how difficult it is, and we know you often get the cold shoulder, but remember, it's like that. It's like that relationship that Francine mentioned. There are many fish in the sea also here, and you need to move on and then find another one. If that person is, for example, unavailable, and sometimes it can be just be the case that they have several other, maybe many PhD students or many postdocs, or just not at the right stage in their career to actually take on something new. That's not impossible, and it doesn't mean you can't ever have that relationship. It may change over time. I think often emeritus professors, when they actually don't have that super busy schedule anymore, are excellent at mentoring newcomers in the field. Not being too pushy, it kind of reflects the same as a respect of busy schedules of mentors, and to be well prepared. I think that I find extremely good, so that if a mentee comes, there's just some sort of structure to the meetings. It doesn't always have to be like that. Sometimes it can just be casual and open. But when it's with regards to specific aspects of career development, that you say, when do I need to go for this, or how do I do this? So specific questions help to guide that sort of conversation. It may not be possible during the very first few meetings, because you just kind of get to know each other. But over time, as you are being guided in your career stage, it's nice to have some sort of structure. But that's maybe just a personal opinion here. And to be proactive. It's the mentee's responsibility to set the meetings, dates and times, and to make contact. So that's that courageous first step. So I'll end there. In a matter of time, I think Dillon will also have some additional insights here, and I invite you to get in touch. You are welcome to get in touch with me and take that first step as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alta. I'm going to suggest that we hold questions and discussion for the panel part after Dillon's talk, if that's okay. So the next speaker in this portion of our meeting is by Dr. Dillon Berger, a senior scientist at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and an associate professor in the departments of Medicine and Cellular Molecular Medicine at the University of Ottawa. He is part of the ISH Executive Committee, chairs the Communications Committee, and is the Deputy Chair of the ISH Newsletter Editorial Board. Thanks, Dillon, for your time.
Thanks, Cam, and thanks again to everyone responsible for organizing this. I really think that this is the type of hopefully practical advice that I didn't necessarily get and learned often the hard way. One thing you will learn the hard way sometimes is not to follow somebody who's excellent at their job. And so I will be repeating a lot of what Alta had presented. But I just thought I'd try to give some of my perspective on what I think worked when I was a mentee, what I perhaps missed out on when I was a mentee in terms of building my relationships, or things that took longer than they should have. And then I'm sort of in the process of transitioning from mentee to mentor, certainly still needing mentors. So I'll try to sort of give some perspective from both sides of it, I think. So I've included images of a number of individuals who've served as sort of long-term mentors in my development. And on the first page, these are just people within my own institution when I was doing my PhD training who mentored me and were responsible. And I think that's the one message you've already gotten today, but I would reiterate is that, you know, this isn't one person training you. It's a group effort. There's people that are going to be excellent at mentoring you on certain aspects of the career and not necessarily on other aspects. And if you had one person mentoring you and just imparting all of their wisdom, then you're just going to be a clone of that mentor rather than sort of the best investigator that you can be, or the best scientist that you can be. So I thought I'd start by talking a little bit about traits that I think are successful. This is a combination of what I think made me successful and what I look for in my trainees. And the first one is flexibility. And Alta mentioned this one in her talk as well. The fact of the matter is that if you are working with a mentor, a good, successful mentor, that they're going to have times where they have to move a meeting or cancel a meeting on short notice. And being flexible as a mentee makes that a lot easier for a mentor, because then they don't feel the burden to try and rush into something and give you, a suboptimal advice. They'd rather, push it back and do it at a time when they can give you sort of their, in-depth conversations that are really going to help advise you. And that's particularly true of the current generation, I would say, of trainees, at least in my experience, that there is this a bit of inflexibility that I think makes it difficult sometimes to interact. And I think, if you want to get the most out of a mentor, being flexible and able to work around their schedule or their times is helpful. And that's not to say that you shouldn't expect some level of respect from your mentor in terms of the timing. I just think that it is just going to come up, and in those times, I think you should just be flexible. Reliability sort of goes hand in hand with that. So if a mentor is going to recommend you for something, recommend you for a talk, recommend you to participate in a panel or something like that, then they have to know that they're going to be able to count on you showing up and giving, your best effort there. And sometimes you'll find this out the hard way by being a mentor too. So if you're a graduate student, sometimes you're mentoring undergraduate students. If you're a postdoctoral fellow, sometimes you're teaching PhD students and master's students underneath you, and having that experience of having to advise people really will give you a sense of what characteristics are important for success, and take those with you. And this is one of the things that I think happened to me about halfway through my PhD, is I started to mentor a little bit and realized, some of the behaviors that I was doing probably weren't making my supervisor too happy. And finally, observant and understanding of your mentors. And what I mean by this is knowing where the strengths of your mentors lie, and not necessarily, and where, I don't want to say weaknesses, but what perhaps characteristics that you don't necessarily want to harness. And so I can give you an example. One of my most valued mentors has a habit of wanting to intervene on my behalf a little too quickly. And so over time, I've learned this, and I've learned not to share anything that's sort of a developing concern with him before I'm ready for intervention to happen, because sometimes it's created a situation where I think that probably a situation wasn't going to escalate, but then the mentor intervened on my behalf. And so just knowing that type of behavior, I think, is really helpful. And then obviously adjusting your expectations and your feedback to the mentor accordingly. This has been talked about already, but having the right mix of mentors is really important. So having senior people who've seen it all, who are able to advocate on your behalf and have a platform to advocate on your behalf is really important. Most of my involvement in the International Society of Hypertension came about because my postdoctoral mentor, Rianne Towers, advocated for my involvement on a new investigator committee there. And she was at a stage in her career where she had the ability to advocate on a large stage for me. So it is important to have senior people, but I think it's also important to have individuals who are close to your career stage. So if you look at the top right mentor there, that's Brad Urquhart from the University of Western Ontario. And he was a PhD student when I was a fourth year honors student in a lab. So about 3 years ahead of me in career path. And we've remained friends for years now. And I regularly rely on him for advice in terms of, early career dynamics. When I went for promotion, he was sharing with me his promotion package and that sort of thing. And I think having somebody that's done what you're doing recently is really important. And Francine mentioned this. I think Alta has mentioned this as well. Having external people is very valuable. And this conversation was happening in the chat a little bit. And I think one of the things about getting your mix of mentors right is being open to mentorship relationships developing organically. So you don't have to seek out mentors for every aspect of your career. Sometimes just being involved in a committee, you'll realize that this person is the best writer you know. And then sort of over time, you ask them if they're willing to review your grants or something like that. And just as you build a relationship and become closer with your peers, I've found that a number of my mentorship relationships developed without even knowing that this was a mentorship relationship. And I'll give you a good example of this down here, because I doubt Alta would have listed me as a mentee. But over the course of the last couple of years, I've relied a lot on Alta's advice and counsel. And I would list her as a mentor in many ways for myself. So I thought I want to end a little bit with some practical conversations that I would advise you to have with your mentor early to maximize your relationship. And the biggest advice I would give you is to establish dynamics for feedback or criticism early in your relationship. One of the things that I found most challenging as a supervisor is understanding how a student's going to respond to constructive criticism. And if a student can come up to me and say, look, just be honest with me, I can handle it, it's a lot easier to provide that feedback in a timely fashion, in a constructive fashion, than sort of walking on eggshells, not knowing whether the person's comfortable getting feedback. That's not to say that your mentor shouldn't be, respectful of you in giving feedback. It's just, establishing how you'd like to get your constructive feedback from your supervisor, I think is really important. That's something when I was a PhD student that I didn't really realize until about my third year of my PhD, and sort of casually in conversation told my supervisor that he didn't have to hold back in giving me criticism. And from that conversation on, we were much more productive together in getting through a relationship. And he was much better at demanding excellence out of me because he felt more comfortable having that conversation with me where just giving me the kick in the pants when I needed a kick in the pants, for example. I think this has been discussed earlier, but establishing the time needs for both you and your supervisor and availability and ensuring that there's a match there. And that may involve expecting less out of your mentor, right? If somebody's exceedingly busy, but you only need them, once a year or something like that, then they still may be able to serve as a mentor. And so maybe just adjusting what you expect out of your mentor in terms of helping your career can really help in sort of matching time demands and availability. This has been talked about, but outline your goals, right? It's a lot easier for somebody to know what they should be doing and advocating for you if they know what your career goals are, what your medium and long-term aspirations are. There's no point in having somebody sit on a hiring committee, for example, for academia if they're not necessarily interested in an academic position. Your mentor could point you to more sort of industry partners or something like that. So being clear about your goals with your mentor, very important. And then, and again, this was mentioned earlier, but be open about relationships with other mentors and be upfront about that. There's no, there is, you don't want your mentor having a sense that you're going out and seeking counsel with somebody else just because you didn't like what they said to you. And so just be honest about why you are seeking out other mentors. I need to, a simple example as well, I need 2 references on a scholarship application. But I think just being open and upfront about it avoids any potential conflict that can arise from that. And so I just finished by saying, don't limit yourself in terms of how you're targeting mentors. Certainly the mentorship program in ISH is an excellent way of connecting. It saves a lot of it saves a lot of stress in identifying external mentors, and the people who are volunteering to be mentors in this program, you bear in mind, they know they have time and they have volunteered to give time. So they are going to be motivated mentors. And so I certainly think that program is absolutely excellent for incorporating into your mix of the people that you're going to be seeking out for career advice. And I'll stop there, and perhaps we can move on to the discussion forum.
Thank you, Dr. Berger and Professor Schutte. We have a few questions from the chat. We'll start with the one from Dr. Marques. She has a question on, or it's actually a question on behalf of mentees. So what should mentees do when mentors don't reply to emails? For example, when mentees are seeking a meeting and they don't get any response, what should they do?
Shall I go for it, Dylan?
Well, I can tell you what I tell my mentees, which is chase me, because it's never intentional. And I think this is coming back to the comment I had about having an upfront discussion about what you're comfortable with in a relationship. So I think you should have that conversation with your mentor before you alter behavior much. But you should be somewhat selfish as a mentee, especially if you're in a formal mentorship relationship where you have a supervisor. And so you should have an expectation that they will respond to your emails. And so, like I said, I will. Sometimes it gets buried in the inbox. Sometimes and so I've just had this conversation with my mentees, and I said, look, just chase me. I'm not going to be offended. Even if you send me 15 emails, I'm not going to be offended. Just chase me. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had on what the dynamic is with a mentor.
I would also like to, I agree with Dylan there. Yeah, it sometimes gets buried in the inbox, but for that very first establishment, let's say you want to make contact for the first time with somebody, I think it's slightly different there. For example, if you then send many emails and the person doesn't respond, they may kind of get irritated and say, I don't have time. And some people unfortunately don't respond. And you will get that. So don't be offended. Sometimes you may have the wrong email address. just double check your contacts are correct. But I think send one and wait another 2 weeks, send another one. I'd say about 3 times. If they don't respond, then move on. That's what I said before. There are many fish in the sea. But if you have that established relationship with a mentor, I would say to, even during your meeting, when you are face-to-face, try and establish a next meeting then. Then you don't have to bug too much on further emails if need be. I also thought perhaps when I saw that post from Francine, if you have to make that first contact via email, it is a daunting thing to do. And I just thought perhaps good to give a few tips on what to do there. And that is not to be too informal. I've had emails from, hi there, and do you have time? I don't think that's appropriate the very first time. I am actually very informal, but I think for that first impressions last. Just say, dear Professor who and who, I am, tell them who you are, don't make the email too long. Quick first paragraph, who you are, your career stage, why you would be interested. And also mention specifics about that person that you are contacting. I noted you are working on A, B, and C, or this is your role, so that it doesn't seem like an email that's copied and pasted to 20 different people at the same time. That is definitely not the way to do it. So be unique to that person's profile, and then briefly say, I respect your time. I would appreciate if it's possible, perhaps for a 30-minute Zoom meeting. Don't make it an hour. It's going to be difficult to do an hour first meeting, and just a short intro. That would be, from my perspective, I think you would get a response.
Yeah, and I agree with all that fully. I think if it's a first email, then it definitely changes the dynamic versus an established relationship. And I think Alta said everything of my feelings on that.
The next question is from Dr. Rodrigo, and is, could you mention some pros and cons that you can recognize when mentors and mentees are from different countries?
Dylan, do you want to go?
Go ahead. I'm happy to follow this time.
Okay. I think that's great. Diversity, I'm a strong believer in diversity. Dylan beautifully mentioned it, having somebody in an early career phase, in a senior or emeritus professor stage, having people from different countries and even from different disciplines. I always say your grandmother can be one of your mentors. If it's on wisdom in life and how to approach people, how to have that emotional intelligence, respect for others, that's basic things of life, but some people still need to hear that. And she will be honest in terms of the feedback. So in terms of different countries, that question is, I think, researchers move around. It's good to understand the dynamics in different countries. You will likely have relationships and collaborations with people across different countries, understanding the context there. It's really enriching. If you only surround yourself with people who's the same like you won't grow as much. That's really important, and I think that's the benefit of the International Society of Hypertension. Having that opportunity is great. But I also want to mention in that respect that the ISH structure is fantastic in establishing relationships, but Dillon had a slide with lots of different mentors on it. That shows you how many there could be, even more. So the ISH may be one. Don't just look at that is my only one, and that is because it's with the ISH. Look locally, look wider. That could be one in your portfolio.
Yeah, to me, I think there's certainly more pros than cons to having mentorship in the other countries. So generally speaking, if a mentor is in another country, they're in a completely different circle and network than you are, and that is highly valuable. It's highly valuable for getting invitations to talks. It's highly valuable for getting involved in other organizations. I'm an associate editor on the European Heart Journal, and I'm not in Europe, but they were looking for people in North America, and I had relationships with some individuals in Europe that led to this, right? And so it's going to open doors from other circles, and that is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly valuable in your early career for showing international leadership. It's one of the most critical components of a promotion package is showing international, and even getting hired is showing international leadership, and having those relationships incredibly valuable. In terms of cons, I don't see a lot of cons. Language barriers can be a potential con to a certain extent, but there's ways to work around that together. And then the one con that I think Alta and anybody involved with ISH knows all too well is timelines, right? And chances are, if you're working in very different time zones, that somebody's going to be sacrificing a time that's not convenient, right? Like, I can't meet with Francine in Australia at a time that is convenient for both of us. One of us is going to be sacrificing a comfortable time, and that's just a reality of it. So that's the only real downside to it. And if people are willing to make those sacrifices, then that's not a major barrier.
Dr. Montezano has a question for the panel, which is, have you always agreed with your mentor's suggestions? If not, how did you deal with the situation? You can take a lead on this one, Dr. Dillon.
Sure. So I have not agreed with my mentor's suggestions in two different circumstances. One where they were clearly right and I just didn't agree and was wrong. And I've had that experience. And then I've had, disagreed and I was right, or at least I think I was right. And I think you have to be introspective when you disagree. You have to think about why you're disagreeing with them, where it's coming from. Is it a lack of understanding from them? Is it a lack of understanding from you? And sometimes informally, with the right mentors, going out and asking for a second opinion is the best way to deal with that. Like I said, make sure that the mentor you're going out for a second opinion isn't going to add to the conflict. So, I think that comes back to where I was talking about knowing who your mentor is. But anytime I disagree with a mentor, I have to look in a mirror. I think that's the first thing you have to do. And I think if it requires outside advice, then you have to seek that.
Yeah, I echo everything that Dillon said. And I also think that is the benefit of having more than one mentor. So you can say, listen, this is what he said or she said, and I wonder, and I don't agree. What do you think? Having that second opinion. And in the end, you form your own opinion, your own person, and a developing academic yourself. And as long as it's a respectful discussion, I don't see much wrong with it. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's the old sentences, if you're dumb, surround yourself with smart people. And if you're smart, surround yourself with smart people who disagree with you. And I think that's, as a mentor, I don't mind a mentee disagreeing with me. I mind a mentee disagreeing with me when the evidence in front of them is that I'm right. But otherwise, I don't mind.
Okay, interesting. The next question is from Dr. Rebecca. She's asking if nurses can also participate in mentoring. Maybe Dr. Francine Marques can also add something to this, but Prof Alta can take a lead on this one.
Do you want to go first, Francine?
Yeah, no, I can clarify. Absolutely, Rebecca. Anyone, any professional, and I think it is so important that we support also allied health in the society and in general, because nurses form such an important basis for healthcare and for the direction of research in general. And I don't think we have enough as part of the society or as part of research. So absolutely any profession can participate in mentoring, and we'd love to be able to work with you if you're interested in how we can do that.
I also want to respond there, Lebo. I am glad about that question, because I really think it's important to have that diversity. Thanks, Francine, also for mentioning nurses are a cornerstone of blood pressure and hypertension management in terms of science in how to better manage hypertension. It is extremely important. Please feel welcome. Please bring more nurses and other allied health workers to the society. We all are dependent on each other, and of course there's academic career for nurses as well. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say, like, I think you see that in ISH, right? You can see that even in the guidelines that came out. There was incorporation of health professional involvement. We want to incorporate that more, and I think we need the expertise in the society to do that. I think if you're going in as a nurse into the mentorship program, the question is, are you looking for somebody with similar career experiences, or are you looking for somebody who's maybe a PhD scientist that can offer other aspects of it? And so I think knowing what you're looking for out of a mentorship relationship there will be helpful in identifying the right mentor. But I think absolutely get involved.
Okay, thank you for the interesting answers and very useful. I'm also learning myself. We have 1 or 2 minutes for any additional question or comments from the panel, please. I don't see any more questions in the chat, so we can just get close. Oh, okay, Francine, thank you.
We're going to ask a question. So what are your thoughts about when mentees feel intimidated by the mentor? How do you break that? Because I feel intimidated by a lot of people. So how do you go about moving that relationship when sometimes we feel intimidated about the person that we're trying to share with?
I mean, I feel intimidated by everybody that I think is even close to as smart as me, or smarter than me. So anybody who's smart, I feel intimidated by to a certain extent. So I would say, when you're trying to think about that, you got to look internally, right? So do you have the right motivations? Are you prepared for a conversation with this person? Do you know what you want out of this? And I think preparedness helps with nerves. And repetition helps with nerves, quite frankly. Go through it. I don't, it's always like, how do you overcome doing this? Well, do it. And I understand that sounds difficult and challenging, but the reality is that it's how you overcome it. And sometimes, like, that is why I went back to let relationships develop organically over time. So some of my mentors I couldn't talk to the first time I was in a room with them, right? But the next time they may have asked me a question, I got a little more comfortable over time, and then they became mentors over a long period of time. And so I think that helps as well. So being prepared and being open for it to develop slowly, if that's how it has to develop, I guess.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think something that I didn't mention before, I think, and I agree with the intimidation. I'm also still very intimidated by many people. That's so normal. The thing is, it gets easier with time. And that's why I was so adamant on having the take-home message that you need to take that first step, although it's intimidating and difficult. Be prepared, make the first meetings short ones. That's what I always think. Don't make it too long. There it gets even more awkward. But have questions prepared, have discussion points prepared. And one thing I do, it's that organic relationship is something that's been mentioned often. And how do you get there? I find getting it there is for you to be present in as much conversations such as these, to be there, to get your name around. You don't have to always be a presenter. You can just participate, pop in a question in the chat box. People recognize your name over time and say, oh yeah, I remember I saw that name before. And that makes it already easier for the mentor who is being approached to realize, okay, yeah, I've seen this person, she or he has been there often, and it really helps. So put up your hand to do stuff. That's that leadership aspect that Dylan mentioned. Put your hand up. It's going to take extra time and effort, but I promise you it will be worth it more and more in the very end. And I'm going to make a comment now, which is maybe not so popular on this call, but put on your video. When you're in Zooms, put on your video, because you want to be seen. You want to be recognized. Body language, verbal, you don't have to do it now, but remember it in the future. I think that is the big issue with Zoom calls. I realize sometimes it's an issue with bandwidth, but that verbal communication is 10 times more important for what you're typing in the box. And being open and honest is kind of part of that for me.
Yeah, and I would add, so if internet connectivity does prevent you from putting your video on full time, then at least make sure you have an image on Zoom of yourself for when your video is off as well, because it is, Alta's absolutely right. It's just about recognition a little bit and familiarity over time.
Thank you very much to our awesome panel. We will now move to our last talk, which is actually a workshop. It will be presented by Dr. Augusto Montezano, who is a Walton Fellow in Cardiovascular Medicine at University of Glasgow. He is the Deputy Chair of the International Society of Hypertension's Mentoring and Training Committee, and also a member of the Women in Hypertension Committee. Dr. Augusto, you can take us away. Thank you.
Thank you, Lebo. Thank you, everybody, for the introduction and for the invitation. So I just wanted to say that, like, here is the time that I please ask everybody to not be intimidated and not be shy. And if you want to turn your camera on, turn your camera on. And if you please keep your, I would say, your microphones on as well, because I wanted to make this like as interactive as possible, because as a workshop, I need you guys to talk to me, and I need you guys to interact so that we can define how to develop your mentoring goals. And this is extremely important, because once you meet your mentor, or once you know that who is going to be your mentor, you need to do some homework before your first meeting, or even like before approaching that person. And that's because if you don't have a goal, that relationship, it won't work. And basically, what I have to say here to you guys is going to be pretty much like sharing my experiences with what I had in terms of mentorship and setting up my goals. Or like the message just showed up in the middle of the screen. I was like, oops, I need to move away. And what the key thing that I have to say to you guys, the important thing for you to develop your mentoring goals is for you to know yourself. So it's a self-discovery pathway that's very interesting. And so that's what I have here. So you need to answer a few questions before defining your goal. And the first one is asking yourself like who you are in terms of like a scientist. So for you to know that, you need to know like what's the definition of a goal. It's the object of your ambition or your effort, an aim for a desired result. So basically, you need to know what's your end result. So like, what do you want from this relationship? But not from this relationship. What do you want for yourself that person or that mentor can help you with? And you need to define that. And to define your goals, you need to know who you are. So you need to know what's your career aspiration, what's the strengths and the weaknesses that you have or your career has. Because once you have like that step back, as Dylan said, you look in the mirror and you see yourself as a scientist or as a professional, you're going to be able to identify what you need to move forward, what you need to grow, and always grow and get better, right? And never get too comfortable. And you need to ask yourself, and for you to know who you are, it's really important for you to know exactly what kind of career you're going to follow. It doesn't have to be, like, it's not going to be a final answer, of course, because everything changes, but you need to know exactly like what you want for that moment, and then understand how you fit in that dream, in the pathway. And the other thing that's important is for you to understand where you are. And by we are, it's like, it's something that, what's the situation that you find yourself at the moment, that can, that will clarify what's your future, like what's the actions that you need to do for you to plan your future steps to move forward. So what I mean, like the where, means like your institution, the type of career, or like how do you get promoted in that institution, what moment on your career you are. Are you a PhD going to your first postdoc, your senior postdoc, applying for your first faculty position? Are you moving countries? Are you having a child, your first child while doing your PhD? So you need to understand what's the situation. So first you know who you are, and then like what's your situation. And that helps you to find like your current need, because that's going to be extremely important, because knowing your current need is going to help you to shape your future plan. And you need to have like a short and a long-term plan. And I think like that's going to help you to plan exactly what you want and your goals in the mentorship. And my suggestion to you is like, don't have like for a first meeting or a first mentorship relationship, work out like a short-term plan, because you don't know how this relationship is going to go. And, you know, I always found for myself like baby steps, or like one step at a time, always helped than trying to go in the meeting and be like, oh, I want to be a professor, I want to have a lab, I want to have grants, I want to have kids, I want to have this, I want, like, it's too much. The person's not going to be able to process anything that you're saying, is not going to be able to even like help you with anything. And the last one is to know who your mentor is. So once you go to a more like structured mentorship program, like the ish that we have, and Francine is going to be happy to see that, you know, a lot of these things that I took from the handbook that we have in our mentorship program, that you have access if you subscribe to it, which is perfect because it really helps you. So once you know the mentor, let's say you're talking to Cam, to Lebo, Francine, myself, and we find you a mentor. It's like, oh, Alta is going to be your mentor. Do your homework. Go and learn a little bit about her. Sorry, Alta, that I'm putting you in the spot here. But like, learn a little bit about Alta. As she said in the email, the introduction email, what does she do? Like, who is Alta if you don't know her, right? Or if you just like, oh, Alta is the person that I see every single time in the conference, in the ISH conference, that I'm trying to talk to her. That's your opportunity, so don't blow it. And you know that she gave an interview for a podcast, you know that she gave like a little interview for the Ish News. Go and read those things, because you start to get her, you get to know her as a person, as a scientist. Because knowing that, you're going to know how she's going to be able to help you. And you're going to know that she's not going to be perfect, because she's not going to have an experience of everything that you want, but you're going to find one of the points that you really need help, and she'll be able to guide you through it. And remember, these relationships are always about sharing. So if you don't know your mentor, or if you don't get to know your mentor, the sharing is going to be broken, and you're not going to take anything out of this relationship. So once you're setting up your goal, you need to know yourself, you need to know your situation, what you need, define what you need, and you need to know your mentors. Now I'm going to give you like an example, like my example of the current moment. So, and that's how I sort of like plan my mentorship goals and my mentors. So I'm currently like moving from Glasgow to back to Canada in Montreal. So I've been out of Canada like for 10 years now. It's going to be like 10 years when I finally move. It's going to be exactly 10 years. A lot of things changed. So for me, in order to be able to go back to Canada, to that system, and thrive in the system, I need to relearn how the system works. And actually, not even relearn, I need to learn how the system works, because when I was there, I was a postdoc. I was a junior postdoc. And now I'm going back as a senior researcher, trying to establish myself as a scientist and in my lab and an independence lab. So the way that I planned my goal is I wanted to establish myself. So I wanted to be able to apply for at least like a grant and be successful. So I need to understand. So my goal is to understand the system in Canada. And I was able to identify different mentors in that situation. And two of them, I was very lucky because they're two friends that are inserted in the system and went through this experience that I'm going through and have the experience like it's fresh in their mind and they're going to be able to help me. One of them is Dillon, that's here, and the other one is Mariani. And the perfect thing is, Dillon, we have already like a relationship from our postdocs. And I'm able to, I feel comfortable talking to Dillon, and Dillon feel comfortable to, just break things to me as honestly as possible. And he's in Ottawa. But the other thing is, Mariani, she's in Montreal. So it's exactly the city and the system that I'm inserting myself into. So I have like two powerful mentors that are probably I'm older than them, like we are the same age, let's say, but it doesn't matter, like career stage or age, like they have the know-how that's going to help me to move forward. And my third mentor that I chose is from the States because I didn't want a third person from Canada. I wanted somebody from a system that is as competitive and similar to Canada that's going to be able to push my boundaries, is going to be able to put me put a lot of question marks on my pathway that is going to make me stronger. So what I want to say here is that like once you know exactly what you need, you're able to identify yourself, your needs, and know the type of mentors that you want, your goal becomes clear. And one thing that I find really important is to draft your goal map. And your goal map should show why do you want that accomplished? What do you need to do or what's necessary for you to get it? How, what's the action plans, and what's next? And what I wanted to do here is just highlight a few things that for the why is like you need to ask yourself, why do you need that goal? Like, why do you believe you need that? And what's the consequences if you get it? And if you're going to be able to deal with the consequences of getting it. Now for the what's the outcome that you're after? What's the evidence is going to tell you that you got it? What's your time frame? And what you need to do, what kind of resources you need to accomplish. And the how, as I said, is the action plan. But what I found like really interesting here is the necessity of a mentor or a team, but also the identification of how committed are you going to be to this goal and what you're going to change or what do you need to change if you have like that imposter syndrome or situations that will stop to get that goal. And that's important because you need to also have your defenses against yourself and against like to the negative things that may happen, and you'll be the little bumps on your ride. And know what's the talents and strengths is going to help you to move forward. And what's next is like to know what changed, how can you adjust to get better. But I think like the important thing here is to have a growth mindset where you're always focusing getting better and not being good. Because remember, you may be the best, but you are one of the best. You're not the only one. Okay? So, and remember, these are my final slides that I want you guys to know. Your goals have to be smart, clear, and pure. And by smart, I think everybody knows it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. You need to be able to do things in a way that you can measure and you know that you're moving forward and something if you need to tweak things. But also need to be clear, which is collaborative. And I think in science, collaboration is key, like not only for you to do your research, but also for you to move forward. It has to be limited. It has to be emotional. You need to be passionate about what you want, because if you don't have the passion, things will be just a drowning. It will be drowning, it will be tiring for you. you need to be appreciative, and also need to be refinable, meaning that is not going to work perfectly as you plan. So you need to be able to adapt. And the pure part, I love this because it has to be positive stated, has to be understood, relevant, and ethical. And the positive stated is, one example that I give when I talk to people about mentorship is that, like, never go to a first meeting saying that, oh, what do you want from this? I don't know. Like, never do this. This is a relationship killer. But think about the positive. If you're lost, how to phrase in a positive way that you are lost. Don't say, I don't know. Just say, well, at the moment, I'm in a transition phase that I'm evaluating my options. And by looking at my CV or my career track, I'm unsure of what possibilities or what career I could go through. And I'd like to have your feedback to help me to visualize my potential or my things. And you see, it's way more positive than like an I don't know, and way less dragging for the relationship. And you go like, oh, I don't know. But guys, now let me just see. Did I talk too much? No, we should have 15 minutes. Perfect. Yay. So I wanted to be a little quick and a little fast here because you guys already heard from Alta, Francine, and Dillon. And what I'd like to do with you is to do like a little exercise. So I will be, did I lose everybody or like how many people I have? Because I can see here, Cam, Lebo.
Got 18 people too.
Oh, perfect. So guys, I'll be splitting you guys in, or Francine help me to split people in like breakout rooms. And what I would like you guys should do is to apply what you've learned, making like a very simple goal map for these 3 different scenarios that we have here. So if you go to the first room, I'm going to be visiting the rooms, confirming who you are. But if you are in the first room 1, you're going to be a last year successful PhD candidate looking for a first postdoc. If you are in room 2, you're going to be an ECR that developed a potentially new drug or technology and is thinking of starting their own startup. So they're going to industry. And if you are C or room 3, you are a senior postdoc in Australia. That's for you, Francine. In Australia, moving to their first independent position at a university in the US. I'm not saying that Francine is moving, I'm just saying like Australia because I thought of her when I put this question here. She's not moving, no. So if you're in those 3 rooms, what I'd like you to do is to draft a short-term goal map. So identify a goal, tell me when you come back, tell me a why. So why that goal is important, what you're going to do, like what do you need, and how you're going to approach it. And that's how you're going to start your first meeting with your mentor. So with that, I'm just going to stop sharing and we can start the breakout rooms. So
before we go into breakout rooms, Rodrigo posted a question asking whether it's convenient to bring a draft of your goals to the mentor, or do you need to talk to the mentor before designing the plans?
I think like, Rodrigo, like this is an important question because what you're going to bring to your mentor is pretty much a draft or your wish list of goals or one goal or one something. Come prepared because your mentor will help you to make that as a diamond of a gold diamond, right? So bring your ideas. You don't need to bring like tons of ideas. Just bring like 1 or 2 things that you would like to discuss with your mentor, and discuss the action plan, your goals with him. It's much more helpful when the mentee comes with a few goals, then you understand what they want and you understand how you can help. But if you leave it to be done in the first meeting, as Alta said, sometimes first meetings are only 30 minutes. You won't have time to get to know him or her and then do all of that. So do like a little bit of your homework before. So I can see that like the moment that I started going to split like in breakout rooms, a lot of people escaped. So I guess like maybe like what we should do is like just discuss the questions here, right? Instead of like breaking up. So I'm going to throw at you guys the last shy people like Cam, Francine, Alta, Dylan. So what do you think would be a good goal for a PhD student that's looking for the first postdoc?
You want to go, Dylan?
Oh no, I just unmuted to be a part of this conversation. I wasn't intent on driving it. I mean, I guess if I'm a supervisor and looking for the mentee, I want to know what their long-term goals are, but also why my lab specifically, right? So I think you need to have are you interested in this as a means to an academic career afterwards? And if so, are you coming to my lab because you're interested in a technique or a paper or, you know, otherwise? So I think it's going to be more than one goal here to me. Right? There's a short-term, there's a long-term goal, and why, you know, why this is your target.
I think like to me, like an important key point to be to understand how to choose that, how to make a choice for that move. Because I remember like when I went to a postdoc, everything happened, not happened by chance, but I was doing like a PhD sandwich with Rihanna. I ended up staying because I loved the lab and the system that was there, that was showed to me. But I was very lucky. But not everybody has that that part. Like they don't go, they're not that as lucky as I was, let's say. So I think like one of the goals that I would have is to talk to my mentor and being like, listen, how can I choose, like, how can I identify a good environment for me, knowing that I would like to become a good researcher. I wouldn't say independent because it may be too soon. You may change your mind in the halfway through your postdoc, but I'll ask like, how can I ensure that my first postdoc would put me in the right path?
I think you need to identify a mentor that has like developed leaders in the area that you want to go to once you've done your training, once you finish that postdoc. So like the obvious one, go to a mentor that's developed a lot of people that have gone into academia, or a lot of people that have gone into industry. So you've got to figure out who are those people, in this case, within the United States, and perhaps come up with a 2 or 3 options, because not everyone's going to have finances or positions available to take you. So knowing what your goal is beyond the postdoc, and then identifying a potential mentor from there. I think that's an important consideration.
On a side note, I will say that when I was making that choice to go from PhD to postdoc, I leaned heavily on my existing mentors for their opinion on that. I practically got kicked into Rianne's lab. I listed off like 3 or 4 labs that I was thinking about, and like every single one of them was like, go to Rianne's lab. And they were right. So I think you can lean on existing mentors for help there.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. When I chose my postdoc as well, it wasn't my decision. You're often so green still at that stage. You don't always know what's out there, so you're very reliant on others who know you best or know you well. And I also relied on that guidance. It wasn't even my PhD supervisor who gave me the suggestion for a postdoc, but it was a mentor. So in my case, that's also true. So it is rather difficult. I think there's no one size fits all. Everyone's unique, and everyone's situation and research interests are unique, but mentors can already help there.
And I can see here in the chat, Francisco like touched like an interesting aspect that I think is important, not only for a PhD student moving to a first postdoc in the like out of his PhD supervisor scope, but also for a postdoc moving to a faculty position, which is getting your scientific identity. So Fran, if you don't mind, me using your question here. So Dylan, Francine, Cam, Alta, and I'm not taking over the interview here, but like it's my Oprah side screaming. How did you guys manage that? So, like, how did you get your scientific identity? from your supervisors? How was the process?
That's a very good question. But I would say that the first thing is actually not so much about the research interest itself. These days, I would be more concerned about the cultural fit and making sure that people can actually work well together, that you have a supervisor that is willing to invest the time in you and properly not just supervise you, but also mentor you and sponsor you and and guide you to the right direction. And the research excellence, if you are in a culture where people care for each other, where people support each other, that's going to make a much bigger difference than if you're just in a famous lab. So I would just be careful that we don't just strive to get a lab because they published a Nature paper, and instead that you're in a lab that you're a good cultural fit and you're going to get the support, because no matter how great you may be publishing, if you're working in a place that makes you miserable, you're not going to last in research.
Yeah, I get Francine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Ron. I felt like I joined labs for my PhD and my postdoc that respected my ideas as a scientist and respected my professional development activities, that were willing to let me participate on committees, and they understood that that was an important part of academic research, and that was my long-term goal, become an independent PI myself. So finding mentors that respected that was important for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it depends at the level too, right? It becomes increasingly important as you go along because you're in the lab for longer periods of time with the same people, right? As a master's student, it's 2 years. If you end up in a bad environment, it's not ideal, but you can get out of there in 2 years and move on to a PhD in a better environment. PhD longer, postdoc probably longer as well. For me, the first time I really remember thinking about it was PhD to postdoc. I didn't think about it in my PhD, my master's and PhD lab. I kind of went to where there was a fit for interest, and it just got lucky. But when I was doing my postdoc, I met with students in the research groups or trainees. I ended up in Rianne's lab in part because I met Guto and I knew that I could get along with Guto. And that was just part of my visit. And I think you can get a pretty good sense of a culture of a lab from talking to people in a lab. People are way more honest than you think they would be. Quite for good or for better or worse.
Yeah, you see, like I'm a good spokesperson for any lab. Like cute and charming, I would say. And convincing. So I guess, guys, this is very important. That's a discussion that you need to have with yourself. So I know that Lebo, we're wrapping up. So just to wrap up the session is setting up your goals is extremely important. And I think the message that I want you guys to have here is have that introspective look. As Dillon said, look at the mirror and then get to know yourself. And that's a question that we mostly ignore for a long time. And I'm saying that because here at the Glasgow, I see it, and we do a performance and development review every year. And a lot of people that I sit with, they really ignore those questions, because it's easier for you to get busy at the bench and doing your science and doing your experiments and being excited about your data analysis and your epidemiological analysis and all those things. But it's very hard to face yourself and face the truth of what you want and how you need to work to get there. But if you have those conversations within yourself, it make it easy for you to make a plan and have goals and let people help you, because that way you're going to identify how people can help you and who can help you. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. So ensure that you look into yourself and put yourself forward for those hard questions. And that's the question that only you can answer, because a mentor will help you shape their answers, but the answer comes from you. The Lebo,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Augusto, for an engaging workshop. I feel like it was too short. We need a longer session to go on, getting words of wisdom from you and the other panelists. So I just want to say thank you for everyone who contributed to this conversation, not only the panelists, but also some attendees in the chat. They've been sending through some advice and stimulating questions. So thank you for engaging in the conversation. So everyone, we have reached the end of our session today. And I would like to thank all the speakers for making themselves available for this seminar. And also to thank all the attendees who made it to the session. And of course, not forgetting the continuous support of the Executive Committee of the International Society of Hypertension. We are very thankful towards your assistance in making events like this possible. And I'd like to say to our attendees, they are more than welcome to apply for the mentoring program and join us in our next events. If you are already a mentee, please do share the word with other people in your network to join our mentorship program, and always be on the lookout for our upcoming events on mentoring and other educational initiatives. So thank you very much. That is the end. You must enjoy your day or your evening wherever you are in the world. On behalf of the Mentoring and Training Committee, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye, guys.